Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. In this video I want to talk about comping, because comping is actually what you spend most of the time doing. As a functioning jazz guitar player, you're probably comping a lot more than you're soloing, and you therefore want to be good at it. And I also see that there are a lot of videos on this. I have a lot of videos on my channel on chords and reharmonizations and stuff like that, but not really too many about comping, because it's a little bit vague and it's hard to demonstrate, and you might not learn it from playing written out examples too much. So it's really about understanding what is happening within a band and how to react to different things. And I think I can probably get that a little bit better across in this type of long form video where we go over some examples, and I'm going to take a standard and just give you some ideas on how to comp on it, where I'm also going to talk about the more vague things than just what chords actually go where and how that works. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to take the standard. I'm going to work with Just Friends, which is a very, or at least fairly well-known standard. And then I'm going to analyze the progression, because you need to understand the progression if you want to play the right chords. So that's at least sort of a basic thing that you need to have down. And then I'm going to talk about different ways of comping in, different types of voicings, different things to think about when you're comping behind a soloist. How do you give room? What do you listen for and stuff like that? And hopefully that's going to give you some info on the whole process of comping as a whole, rather than just here's a drop 2 voicing for a B flat major 7. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, about scale options, different arpeggios, how to improvise over progressions or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. I publish a new lesson every week, and if you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little notification bell next to the subscribe button. The first thing we need to do is probably to analyze the song, because if you want to comp a song, you want to understand what the chords are, what their place is, both in the key and also in the song, and where they're going, so that you can, that's going to tell you something about what extensions you can use, and it's also going to tell you something about what you can use for substitutions. So that's important to really be aware of this. So if we look at Just Friends, I'm using the key of F. It's played in F, and it's also sometimes played in G, so there are both sort of common keys for it. And the form of Just Friends is a 32 bar standard, and that's of course important to know, because also that's going to tell you something about how easy it is to learn it. The good thing about Just Friends is that the two halves are pretty much identical, so there's a lot of stuff that's just repeating, and that makes it a lot easier to approach and to learn. I think the only difference between the two halves is really that we need sort of a complete ending in the second half, so we go back to the tonic chord to just really end the melody, and in the first half we need to go back to the second half, so that's going to the dominant and then just quickly pointing to the beginning of the second half. Just Friends starts on the 4th degree, so in the key of F that's a B flat major 7. And then that's for 2 bars. Then we get for 2 bars 4 minor, and in this case that's written out as B flat minor 7, E flat 7. Then it goes to the tonic. And sometimes you'll see that written as a tonic with the 3rd in the bass. And then we get sharp 4 diminished, which is in this case it's in inversion, so it's a B diminished with an A flat in the bass. And in a lot of versions you'll also see that this is written out as a 2-5, so A flat minor 7, D flat 7. So you get sort of a sort of chromatic 2-5 for the next part, because our sharp 4 diminished resolves down to the to the 2 chord, 2nd degree. So we get G minor 7, C7, and then 1, or sometimes written out also as a 3 chord. Really, it doesn't matter, it's just a tonic chord. So the function of it, whether it's an A minor or F major, is not really that important. And it doesn't matter for the melody either. Then we get a 6 chord. Then we get the dominant of the dominant for 2 bars. And as I probably talked about in other videos, this is a place where I very often use a Lydian dominant, which is also that's the normal thing to do. And then we get sort of two 5s to take us, partly the dominant is of course resolving to the dominant. In this case that's resolving to a 2-5, so G minor, C7. And then we need to go back to the 4th degree, and you can do that in 2 ways. You can have a straight cadence to the 4th degree, so, or you can have the tritone substitution of that, which is F sharp minor, B7, and then we're back on B flat. The second half is of course pretty much the same. So 4, 4 minor, and also notice that I'm really thinking of this. Just the 4 minor, B flat minor, E flat 7, and F is just 4 minor to me. It's just one thing. And whenever you can reduce a set of chords to sort of one sort of sound and one thing, then that's easier, because then you don't have to think about too many things when you're trying to learn the song. It's a good thing that you can sort of, it's a little bit like, I think I used the analogy before, it's like reading. You don't want to remember a word by just memorizing the letters, you just want to remember the word, and that's kind of what this is. So basically the first part of Just Friends is really just B flat minor to F. So B flat major, B flat minor, and then we're on F, then we get the sharp 4 diminished. Maybe something that will be worthwhile talking about with this, I almost never use diminished scale on diminished chords. I think diminished scale is it's a symmetrical scale. It's not a real scale, if you can say that, because it's a sort of theoretical construct. It's a mathematical thing. So it's not really what we hear in terms of music, and therefore I don't think it's the best first choice for anything really. It's a nice effect and you can do a lot of great things, and I use it a lot, but for the diminished chords, it's really not the thing you want to use. In this case, since the song is in the key of F and we just look at our A flat or B diminished, I call it sharp 4 diminished, mainly just because that kind of fits sort of a whole category. Again, summing up chords, different chords to just make it into one category, makes it easier to have an idea about what they sound like in the key, and also just to how to deal with them in terms of what scale and what extensions and stuff like that. And that goes for the 4 minor and goes for the sharp 4 as well. So if we need to find a scale to play on this, it's actually kind of simple, because the song is an F. So this is an F major scale, and we need to fit in our A flat or G sharp diminished, and one way to do that is simply just to start changing notes there, and then you get 2 different options really. So we need to have, instead of a B flat, we have a B. It's a sharp 4, right? So that, of course, if we change the B flat to a B in F, we get F Lydian really, or C major. But we also need to have the A flat or the G sharp in there, and one way to do that is just to change the G into a G sharp. And then we have this scale. Well, and now I'm playing it for an F, which may or may not make too much sense, but because we're thinking from the F major, then I'm gonna do that. But what you can hear here is that's a harmonic minor. The other option you get is if you choose to, instead of turning the G into a G sharp, you could turn the A into an A flat, and then you get this scale, which is C harmonic major. But that's sort of the scale that I'm going to use there, and this is also going to be what I use for the extensions that I need, a bit at least. And then later, I mean, that's the first place, that's where you want to start with the dim chords really, when you're comping them. And also if you hold your dim chords against the melody in the standards where you come across, then that's what's going to fit that. It's not going to be diminished scale really. Diminished scale might work, but it might also not work. And I think the main thing is just that you have to think about the diminished scale as something synthetic really, and that means that you can apply it and you can do great things with it and make beautiful sounds with it, but at the same time it's not something that's sort of naturally going to appear in a song most of the time, unless you're talking more sort of modern jazz harmony. I think I'm not sure, but I doubt if there are any really any standards that have diminished scale in them. So after this small tangent on dim chords, then the second half, so we're going on from our diminished here to G minor, C7, and now we get, and I think purely just because we can get away with it in terms of the melody, we get like a cadence to 6, so E half diminished, A7 to D minor, and then to the dominant, and then the dominant, and then back to the tonic. And of course, in the turnaround for this song will be some sort of C minor, F7. One that I use a lot, now we're anyway on sort of directly to the different reharmonizations, which is of course not what's supposed to happen, but still. Very often, a normal thing to have in turnaround is of course 1, 6. But if you have a song that starts on 4, then you have 1, 6, and then you need a 2, 5 to 4, which is C minor F. And one way you can do that, the sound's kind of smooth, and you can do that with a lot of songs, I think, is to play F, D minor, and then I actually just add chromatic moving minor chords, so D, D flat, C minor, F7. And this is like a way that you're adding voicings where you don't expect a soloist to do this. This is like one bar of D flat minor, and it can actually clash with the melody, and it's not really about that. You have this whole set of movement within a comping where you can actually get away with things that if you had to put it into the solos, if you had to solo over it yourself, you have to work really hard, and that's really not the idea. You just add it, and there are just tensions that you immediately resolve, and that's actually what's happening here. Because, of course, the song will just have F for one bar, so F6 because the root is in the melody, and then the C minor F, and we just need to embellish that. And that's one way to do that. That was a chorus of Just Friends with me comping in a sort of basic way, no complicated embellishments or anything like that. Just using drop 2 voicings because I'm gonna go over, I guess, 2 sets of voicings and talk a little bit about what I'm doing, and just maybe not so much to that you have to check out exactly what I'm doing, but just that you have an idea about what's the thinking behind the different voicings and what am I using. And the 2 things that I use the most, I guess, is drop 2 voicings and triads. Those are really the biggest part of what I do. And then the other things I do are a little bit harder to categorize, and often also just coming out of the drop 2 and the triad voicings, because I think that's how I end up with a lot of chordal stuff as well. But just to cover this thing, just quickly to go over the voicings, because there are some ideas on how I use the drop 2 voicings that might be worthwhile checking out. And one of them is to use, well, basically to use minor 7 voicings for major 7 voicings. So in this case, I'm starting off with, on the first B flat major 7, I'm playing this voicing. And of course I could have used this one as well. So basically, I'm playing a D minor 7 over the B flat. And that gives me a B flat major 7 with a 9. And that's a sound I use really a lot. And there are a few sort of nice things you can do with that. But in general, you just want to really get used to thinking of your D minor 7 voicings as B flat major 7 voicings as well. So you want to not really that different from the way that we can see a scale as being different, fitting on different chords, or the way we can use different arpeggios. This is the exact same arpeggio idea that I always talk about, so we can use the B flat major arpeggio, B flat major 7 arpeggio, and the D minor 7 arpeggio on a B flat major 7 chord, and the same goes for the voicings, in fact. You just have to be aware that you can't really use a 9 on the D minor 7, but for the rest it's all fine. So that's something to check out if you're not familiar with that. I have a video on taking that approach quite far. I'll try and link to it in the description. And then B flat minor, that's just a B flat minor 7 voicing. The E flat 7 voicing. So E flat 7, you can think of it as being an E flat minor 6 also. Of course, when you play, you kind of need to really still think of it as being an E flat, because that's what it is, that's what you hear, and that's probably what you want to think. So you need to train hearing this voicing as an E flat 7. But maybe the gateway is just thinking of it as a B flat minor 6. And then we get F major, and I'm playing that with an A minor voicing. I think I used this one, but I could just as easily use this one or this one. It's not so important. The diminished chord, so the A flat diminished, well this is an A flat diminished, and this one is an A flat diminished with an added flat 6, which is something I do quite often. One reason is also that if you look at the sharp 4 diminished chords, then this is one of the most common melody notes. Like, what do we have? Some demo principal common does that. Or in I Remember You will have it too. So that's a very common melody note to have on that diminished chord. And then we get the 2-5-1. That's just this stuff, I think. 3, 6, just so 3 is A minor voicing, normal D minor voicing, G7. The voicing, so this is similar to the idea behind the E flat 7. So the voicing that I'm kind of thinking this out of is this one, and that's another way you can think of that. This is a D minor 6 voicing. So D minor 7, D minor 6. And then I think I already forgot what I played, but I think I did this thing with the sharp 11 as well. 2-5, and then so 2-5 in the keys of G minor, C7, C minor, F7, B flat major 7. Then we're B flat minor, E flat 7, same thing. I think I went up here for the diminished, but that's just, I mean, it's a diminished chord, and you can always just invert that. That's just moving around on guitar. One of the few things that's easy on guitar. Then we get this one kind of nicely goes to this G minor. And I think I went to this C7. And we get the second half we have the E half diminished A7 to D minor. I played that like this, I think. And then G7, C7, and then the last F6 chord is again. So when we have the F in the melody, you can't really put the major 7 there. Or at least if you want to do that, that has to be really on purpose. It's not that you can't do it, you can of course do it, but maybe you want to be aware of it. If it's behind a singer, you might get fired. So the voicing I used for this is just a D minor voicing, because that will work well with this melody note. And then we got 2-5 back. This chorus is just using the triads, and my approach with the triads is maybe a little bit more loose, and I'm using some voicings that are sort of derived from triads as well as just being really plain old triads. For the rest, the idea is pretty much the same. I'm, for the most part, just taking the core chord and then taking away the bass note, and then that leaves me with a triad. So that means that for the first chord, I think I'm using this one. I hope I can still remember what I played. But there's like a B flat major 7, take away the B flat and you have a D minor triad. I think it is something like that. And then the next one, well, if you take B flat minor 7 and then take away the B flat, you have a D flat major, so that's this triad. And that one turns into this voicing, which is again, of course, not sort of strictly a triad, but just coming out of going from B flat minor 7 to B flat minor 6. And of course, it's an E flat with a 9. This type of triad, that's actually something I'm going to make a video on at some point. The major flat 5 triads, because they actually have a name in Dutch music theory, but not in English as far as I can tell. So, which is interesting because we play them actually really a lot. So it's nice to have a name for them, and we should maybe also practice them and think about how they work. But I'll make a video on that sometime. Then we get to the F major 7, and then I'm just playing A minor triad with a bit of melody again. Really, like, I'll play the main sound like this, and then I actually don't worry too much about what happens when I start playing the melody, because I already sort of stated the chord, which is, I mean, that's kind of the point of the comping, is just to lay down the chord, and then you can do different things under it. You don't want to overdo it. I think my examples here, it's actually not that bad, but sometimes when I make comping examples, because there's no soloist, then I play more than I would if I'm really comping. I would probably play a lot less in a real situation, but just sort of to fill, there's room, so I take it. And that's also probably what I do when I'm actually comping, but then usually there's also soloists, so there's just a lot less room. And this is something that's also an important part of comping. You try to be active when the soloist is not doing too much. That's an important part of what's going on, I think. So A minor, I think, moves down here. Then we get the diminished, and that's also just different inversions of the diminished triad. And then, of course, also this one, coming out this one, which is also diminished triad, but then with a substituting one note. So in this case, the D for an E, which is the flat 6, I guess, again. Let's see, what did I play? On G minor 7, I think I played the B flat major triad, and then to turn that into an F7, we just changed the F to an E, leaving us with a B flat major flat 5 triad again. Then we get C major triad for A minor, F major triad for D minor. Of course, now I'm saying all these things, and I think I mentioned it with the drop 2 voicings, but I think it's very important that you get used to playing these things and not think the triad, but really think the chords that you're playing. So you have to play, if you play this, you cannot think C major when it's an A minor you're playing. You really need to still do that. And the reason why you want to do that is that you still want to hear, unless you're really changing the sound of the chord, you still want to hear the chord the way it's there in the piece. So you want to hear A minor 7 if that's what's there, and you're playing something like this. If you change it to an A7 or something, that becomes a little bit different story. But in this case, we're just using fewer notes, and it's not a good idea to start building these weird progressions where we have to think about other chords that are not really there. So if you're playing G minor 7 to C7 to C major, because that's what you're playing on the A minor, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you're thinking about an A minor still, then it's like, okay, it's a 2-5, and then it goes to 3, which is also a tonic chord in F major, and that's how that works. And that's what you have to still think. So you kind of need to get used to thinking of this one in this context as being an A minor. Which, if you sort of connect it to the drop 3 voicing, you can find sort of small shortcuts in the way you're thinking. That's not so difficult, really. But you do need to make that choice, because otherwise you're going to be thinking other progressions, and that's not helpful, I think. You want to minimize the amount of thinking you want to do when you're playing, because in general you don't have any time to think. You need to just focus on listening to what you're playing and what everybody else is playing, and then making sort of these more large-scale decisions than sort of specific stuff like leading notes or chords or stuff like that. That's not what it's about, I think. So in that way, that's something to be aware of, that you can think of that. And I think mostly you just have to be aware that if you're thinking another chord and you have to make steps to come up with the voicing, then you need to practice more. That's basically it. So now I forgot where I was. So I think it's the C major, F major. Then we go to the G7, and coming out of this one, similar with the dim chord actually. So it's just this diminished triad where I change out the 5th of the chord with a 13. And then I forget, but I probably played this. So again, same idea for the G minor 7, C7. And then also that the same type of idea, but just in another inversion for the C minor F7, which is E flat major triad, and then changing the B flat into an A. So the second half, this D minor triad, and then we are moving up to this D flat major triad for the B flat minor. Same idea as before though, so just changing the A flat into a G to get the E flat 7 with a 9, like this. Then we get the F, same A minor triad I think. And then the dim chord, which is now just dim triads. Notice that I'm really, when I play these things, I'm thinking a lot more about melody than anything else, probably. Melody and the rhythm of the melody. That's what I'm mostly concerned with. I'm not too concerned with exactly the extensions, or I mean, I'll have some idea about certain chords. Well, I need to sort of pull something out, but that's based more on understanding what the chord is in the key than anything else. So in this case, this becomes this melody, all leading down to this G minor, which is again just E flat major triad, C7. Then we get the 2/5, so E half diminished, A7, G minor triad, it's the top part of an E flat half diminished, and then an A7 like this. So that's just a C sharp diminished triad. I think this F major triad for D minor, and then nothing really special. This A minor triad for the F major 7 at the end. If we think about what we're trying to achieve with comping and maybe just get a really clear idea about what the goal is with what we're doing, then it's a little bit easier to approach it in the right way, and it's also maybe a little bit easier to think about whether something works or not. And I think that's one way of looking at how to work on comping and also how to understand comping, because it's something that's going to be depending on a lot of things. For instance, if you play behind a soloist, so of course you kind of need to give the soloist something to lean on somewhat. Of course that can be something about leaning on, but it can also sometimes be for some soloists that they want to be challenged and they want to sort of get maybe lean on the energy, so you have to give them some energy for them to play against and really just push them. And that will, you really have to feel your way in how the soloist reacts to different things with that. That's definitely something. So you have to really listen for how a soloist reacts if you play a lot, and you also have to think, like, look at or listen for how the rhythm section is playing and what the role is within the rhythm section, because that's also going to make a difference. So if you play something where you play, for instance, a lot of short chords, but really like a lot of rhythms, which is typical for hard bop, like Wes Montgomery playing with the Paul winners behind Cannonball Adderley is quite busy. He plays really a lot of rhythms, but he doesn't really get in the way. And you can, if you're good at playing a lot in the right way, you can do that and then not get in the way, and it's going to be okay. So that's one way of doing that, and that's of course also typical for hard bop that they do that. Another, maybe almost an opposite example of that would be Bill Frisell with Paul Motion and Charlie Hayden playing behind Joe Lovano in those on Broadway records, where Bill Frisell is playing very few notes and he's playing a lot of sustained notes. He has this compressor thing going on, that so he almost doesn't sound like a guitar at times. And the point of that is that he just lays down the harmony, and it's not really, he is interacting with the soloist but in a completely different way, and he's not trying to convey the groove. He's leaving that open and giving them the rhythm section, which is Paul Motion and Charlie Hayden, a lot more freedom, which also, of course, it's a completely different period, and they want more freedom in there. They are not hard bop players. They don't want to just have a groove going on. And that's the thing that we get with comping, is that there are as many ways of approaching this as there are styles or sub-styles in jazz. And really what you want to do is you want to feel your way and notice how you play differently with different people. I think that's the best way. And it's also the most fun, I find, because I like the interaction. I like to sort of check out what different drummers and soloists do with different things, and how well you can feel a connection. With some people you can really feel a very you get a really strong idea about what they like, and they only want to hear that. And with other people, you can sort of take it places, and sometimes you can find a balance where you can give them room, and other times you will sort of take more control of the dynamics. Usually when you're comping in a full band setting, you're sort of in charge of the dynamics together with the drummer. Probably the examples that you want to listen for with that is Herbie Hancock with Tony Williams, especially, which is a place where there's a lot of interaction, and sometimes it's connected to what the soloist is doing, but also sometimes they're just sort of in control, and there's not really any interaction with the soloist, just within the rhythm section everything is happening. So those are the kind of things you want to think about. You want to think about what the other guys are playing, how the soloist reacts, and then of course you just want to convey the harmony, but that's fairly simple. I already covered 2 different ways of doing that with the triads and the drop 2 voicings. You also of course need to connect the chords, because one thing is that I've shown you how I choose some chords and what chords I choose, but really what I'm thinking about when I'm comping is that I'm thinking in terms of a melody, and I'm thinking in terms of a rhythm. And I'm not really thinking about the specific voicings. I'm also not too often thinking in terms of specific extensions. If I think about that it's going to be more as a type of sound that I'm sort of have in mind, rather than now I'm hearing a flat 9 and a flat 13 on the dominant. So that's something that you need to check out as well. And there are several ways you can work on this. Of course, just playing the song slowly is one thing that I've done a lot, and then also that I do to practice this, and also what I give my students. So making so these slow, stepwise moving melodies through a piece. So So in this way, I'm just practicing to move to the chord that's close all the time. And that's of course one thing. Then if you try to take something like this and then make them into small melodies, because really, and that's actually the great thing about comping also, that's at least what I like about it, is that you get to really improvise all the time. You might not be playing a solo, but you are interacting with the rest of the band, and you are creating something new. You're not just playing your voicings. At least that's, for me, not how it works really. I do try to really come up with something new and see what happens, and what I can do with whatever is there. And that part of the improvisation and that part of the interaction is something that I really enjoy. And that's also why I like comping really a lot. If we just take the first chord, so now I need to make, and really it's just a chord solo with a very few notes. If I have to play B flat major 7, it's worthwhile checking out like how to play through the scale. So here we need another chord, but and have chord voicings everywhere. And then once you start to play, you can go. So now you can also hear how I'm practicing playing small melodies with the material that I have available. I'll play the voicing for the, now I'm doing it on the A minor 7, so on the F major 7, which is the A minor triad, is what I'm trying to say. A small, just stepwise, leading us down to the diminished chord. And in the beginning of the diminished, I'm just, because the melody is coming down so low, I'm just playing 2 notes, adding the last one later. Because the melody is in this case actually more important, and you can still hear the change. In the context of the song, we already heard the theme, everybody can hear that that's this. So that's something that I guess I focus more on, and that's also what I practice. And that's also what I would practice if I'm comping through a tune. So and you can tell like there's a lot of stuff that starts to happen when I do this, because I'm very used to it. So I have I do this in several layers. I think next week, so when this video goes up, then on the Thursday I'll publish a video on counterpoint, which is talking a little bit about this, and that's of course also happening. But the main thing that you want to be aware of is just you can do a lot by just not playing entire chords all the time. And probably my choice in terms of having sort of drop 2 voicings on the top 4 strings and triads on the middle strings as the main part of what I do means that I also, most of the time, I actually have sort of the basic part of the chord, so the 3rd and the 7th on the middle string set. And that gives me a lot of freedom to just move around. And I mean, when I'm doing this, first these are just triads. So first a D minor triad and then a sus triad, and then we also get to the drop 2 voicings. And it's just flowing together, and it's just tied together because of the melody, really. And then another thing that I make a lot of use of is that I'm not only playing all the notes at the same time. I find that arpeggiating is something that works really well for this. And of course, most of the time I'm doing that with my fingers, not so much with a pick, I guess. But well, I do it with a pick as well, I guess. But so yeah, so those are the things you want to think about. You really want to think about just really making small melody statements, and that's because that's what's mainly going on. And I will on occasion, of course, move something down through the chord, and then you'll have melodic movement later, lower, and it's going to be some sort of counterpoint. But most of the time, solid melodic ideas which are simple, because you can't do like really weird things because you're still comping, and this might even be on the busy sides. Though when it's sort of connected together that well, then it's easier to get away with. I think from my 2 examples with Wes and Bill Frisell, I probably am more in the Bill Frisell camp, really, because also like he's a huge influence on me for comping. So is Herbie Hancock, and also so is Schofield. Not that there are that many records where he comps a lot, but when he does. Like that's the Joe Henderson record, that's great, where he's comping quite a lot. And those are the things that I listen to for comping. And that's what I try to use with this. And in this case, I mean, those are just tools, and you want to think about it as developing small melodies you can do. Then one thing that I'm not doing here that I also do quite often is that I'll stick with a riff for it. And this is something I've talked about before. I think I made a video on it also as well, I'm not sure. Because now I'm playing kind of open, I'm just improvising freely, but in some cases, especially if there is some sort of static groove happening, which can be in, obviously you will do this in a Latin tune, because everybody's playing a groove, and the part of the guitar is usually going to be, especially if it's Brazilian stuff, there's like a really distinct pattern that you kind of need to relate everything you do to, and you probably need to play it most of the time as a guitar player. But in jazz as well, and especially if you think from a hard bop perspective, so again with Wes, Horace Silver, Wynton Kelly, those kind of people, then you get the idea that you can play quite a lot, but you need to sort of sit in the groove, and you're not doing anything except conveying the groove and the harmony. And if I do that on Just Friends, that could be something like this. What you hear in this example is that I'm taking sort of an idea and I'm sticking with it for a bit, and then I'm moving to something else. And I think that's sort of the most natural way to do this type of comping in a jazz setting. I think you have to sort of move towards other types of grooves before you, if you want to play really static things. But of course you can also practice like that, and you can just go into sort of a riff for some period of time and just stick with that to build energy by repeating things, because repeating things is also a way to build energy for sure. And it's also something that really sits well in the groove, has a lot of energy, and it works like that as well. So that's a reason to check out these kind of things. So what you hear in the recording is that I'll take an idea and I'll play it for like 8 bars, and then when the song changes to another part of the form, so we kind of have sort of 8 bars as a main thing in the beginning, and then we get a more moving 8 bars, and then we repeat the first 8 bars, and then we get like a different tag at the end. And I'll play differently through those things, because the first 8 bars are a little bit more static, so they really lend themselves well to play that. And I guess if you want to practice this, it makes sense to just take one pattern and then move that through the song. And of course, these patterns, this is related to the groove, this is related to the song, so your patterns are going to be 1 bar or 2 bars or 4 bars, and it's going to sort of sit well. And another thing that's also important about comping is that you have to be aware of where you lay down the 1 and when you're really clear, because you might have a pattern that's not that clear, but sometimes you really just want to relate everything to, like, now we're here in the song, this is before an important part of the form, or we're at the top of the chorus, or those kind of things. And that's something that you also want to incorporate in your comping, and have conscious choices of when does it call for that, and when doesn't, when don't you need to, and when do you need to, because they're both things. I mean, and sometimes you'll have soloists who really tend to play over the form, and they'll start a phrase at the end of the chorus and carry on with it into the next chorus to connect their solo, and then it can actually ruin everything if you're really clear on when the top of the form is. So that's also something to be aware of when you're comping and listen for. In general, actually, when you want to work on comping, a lot of what you need to do is listening to records, because then you understand what's happening and you can hear how things connect and how things don't connect. For me, as I mentioned, like Herbie Hancock and Schofield are really good examples of this. Well, actually, Wynton Kelly as well. Wynton Kelly is not as interactive as Herbie Hancock is. There's not that amount of reaction to what is going on. But at the same time, it is very solid, and it's very tasteful, and then the ideas are great. So for that, it's also great to listen for. And of course, he plays on Smoking at the Half Note, so you probably already have a record where you can check it out. Yeah, and then so that's how you work on this. And also, you have to think about the fact that even though this might seem like an exercise and it might be a bit boring, taking a riff and moving it through the progression is actually also helping you develop your vocabulary for when you don't tie yourself down to a riff, because otherwise then you maybe are not being as free as you think you are when you're trying to play open. That's also a very common thing, that we don't realize that we play the same rhythms all the time. And adding a new rhythm, one easy way to add a new rhythm is just to sort of take that rhythm out and then just play it through a song. Then it tends to stick after a few choruses, and then you can use it. And if you keep on using it for a bit, then it will just become part of your system. So that's an important part. So the riff comping is actually important for being able to play more open. To quote one of my teachers also, in terms of actually playing sort of open where there's almost no groove, is that even though if you're playing open, you have to decide together in the band about what groove you're not playing, because that's what you need to relate what you're doing anyway. So you kind of have to hear a groove. If it's an open samba, you have to kind of be aware of what kind of samba it is and agree on it. Otherwise, it's not really gonna happen. Then it's just gonna be a mess, and you get conflicting ideas, because what open is actually just not playing the groove. But then you also have to really agree on what parts of the groove you're not playing, because if you're leaving out part of the groove, then what you do play has to fit with the groove that you're not really playing. That sounds weird, but that's actually very true. And I think if you if you check out people who are playing open, you'll find that that's actually what they're doing most of the time, just to avoid getting lost also, but also just to get it to work together. Otherwise, it just becomes 3 or 4 people playing at the same time and not necessarily playing together. So that can be a huge danger in opening up stuff also. So yeah, so that's why you want to work on riff comping in terms of also learning how to open up things. In this example, I'm trying to play more open, and since I'm using a backing track, that just means that I just leave the sort of laying down the groove to the bass and the drums, and then I'm just sitting on top trying to convey melody and the color of the chords and some movement within that, and keeping it interesting in that way. I think the comparison with the Bill Frisell thing on Broadway, that record series from Paul Motion, is probably close to what's happening here, really. Sort of, there's a lot of what I hear with what Bill Frisell does is kind of doing this, so just having your own thing happening on top of a rhythm section that's taking care of the groove, and you don't really have to participate in that. And of course, when you're comping, really, this goes both for the riff comping and for this, you probably won't find yourself doing only one thing. You're going to be doing a mix of these two, and you'll also find that probably for some soloists, maybe for one soloist in the same song even, you'll do one thing, and for another soloist you'll do something else. And that's like there are a million factors in that, because for instance, if you're playing behind a bass player, then you would probably try and play sort of stuff that doesn't take up too much space. So you want to play just soft chords and just move it like this. And then whenever there needs to be something clear in terms of where the rhythm is, then you might add a few sort of more rhythmical ideas. And for the rest, you're just gonna try to not get in the way of the solo, because for instance with a bass player, that's really easy to get in the way sonically and just take up too much room and not give them the room to get their solo across, which is obviously you're trying to comp the bass player soloing, so you want to help them. You don't want to sort of showcase your fantastic comping. That's not the point. So you will find that you'll be doing different things depending on the situation, and even within one solo depending on what's happening. But at the same time, what I'm relying on here is when I play like this and when I'm trying to open up more, this is something that's I guess for guitar probably like 70s and on. So these are the people who do that, and that's also the people that I think I'm boring for. That's also why I'm saying Bill Frisell, who's I guess active from the beginning of the 80s on. And yeah, so the idea is that I'm actually trying to use the guitar as an instrument a little bit better, because I find that if I'm playing just then I might do that with a pick as well also, and it doesn't really matter. And there is so much more to the harmony that we can pull out, and it's a lot easier if you really use the fact that you're playing with your fingers and you can arpeggiate the chords and just make movements and sustain notes. So that's what I'm relying on, and that means that I will play some chords, all the notes at the same time, but for the rest I'll also just be doing a lot of stuff that's trying to sort of pull out interesting intervals and using that. And at the same time, these voicings are still coming out of the, by the way, the triads really, or this one would be a shell voicing though, but this for the B flat minor is a B flat minor triad with a 9 instead of the root. And these types of sounds, because I'm more interested in sort of getting the colors across, and my focus is more on the color of the harmony and the melodies that I play, and I'm less rhythmical, then I might not play complete chords, and I will emphasize sort of interesting intervals. So, and I think that's also sort of an important thing to be aware of when you're comping. And just mess around and try whatever works. I think the first thing you probably want to work on with that is just to be able to arpeggiate. So just see what happens if you do this. And I guess also with this, I'm coming out of the thinking from the melody. So I might think the melody in several layers. So I might have a melody that's going on. No, that's not a good example. So if we do here, like, so what's happening here is really that I might sustain like a melody note, and then have another melody moving under it as a sort of fill, and that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And then you just leave that hanging there, and of course technically you need to be able to play a melody under it. This is again the thing where you combine everything you know, and you start thinking in chords and intervals and melodies while you're comping, and it has to all sort of come together and be a whole. And of course that takes some work, but you do actually kind of evolve that, I think, from, at least that's what I did, that kind of just evolved from playing normal chords the way I talked about with the triads and the drop 2 voicings and shell voicings and chordal harmony and all those kind of things, and then you just sustain a chord. So you go like here, first the melody, then the chord. And then using that as a starting point, and then you just add the colors later. And again, I think the important thing with that is that you of course you have to have some freedom in harmonizing whatever melodies you come up with, but at the same time you're starting with a chord and then you're just seeing what's possible within that. This is of course also a bit on the busy side. I'm not sure I would do that too much, but I will have, whenever there's room, you might find some sort of sustained note, and then a melody moving under it, and then the melody is really just going to be, like in this case, just a B flat major 7 arpeggio, something that's really still connected to the harmony. So that's technically how I open things up. So I'm focusing on interesting intervals that are important to the sound. So in this case, like the 9 and the minor third on the 4 minor chord is important. On the first chord, it's also, actually there's also a minor second, because it's the B flat, that's the sort of 4th degree subdominant note, and then connected with the fact that we have the A in the melody. As I mentioned, I have a video coming out later this week on counterpoint, so you can also check that out. There are going to be some examples in there on how you can add some counterpoint ideas to some progressions and some chords. I guess, I mean, these are some thoughts on what you can do with comping. It's an open-ended discussion, obviously. As you can tell, because it's going to be, as I said, it's depending on who's playing and what style you're playing and what song you're playing. So there are a lot of factors in this, and also the band. Is it are you playing together with a piano player? Are you the only guy comping? Is there a bass player or not? There are going to be all sorts of things happening with that. I think it's an interesting thing. As I said, we spend most of the time comping when we're playing. At least we spend more time comping than soloing, and I think really for myself it's really a fun thing to do. I like doing that a lot, and I also try to think about it. And I think the most you can take away from this video is, of course, some of my approaches to playing chord voicings and some of the things that I think about. And then for the rest, also maybe use some of that information when you're listening to people comping. And again, I would emphasize like like Herbie Hancock with Tony Williams playing behind Miles Davis, especially when they're playing playing standards. Just hear all the stuff that's happening, because I think it's very interesting, and there's a lot of stuff sort of really being defined there that's worthwhile checking out. And also that one Joe Henderson album with Schofield called So Near So Far, that's also a really great example of comping on guitar. I think at least that's something that it's just an album I've listened to a lot. Schofield's playing his playing is completely insane on that album, both soloing and comping. So and the band is anyway a complete all-star band, so definitely something you need to check out. So yeah, try and listen to that, and also just keep those things in mind, like who in the rhythm section is laying down the groove, and what is the piano player or the guitar player trying to do. Are they playing also groove, or are they more just playing colors and sort of trying to really focus on the harmony? I think those are interesting things to think about when you're playing, when you're listening, and also stuff to be aware of when you're playing. Of course, you need to work on it so it's internalized, because otherwise it's not going to be worth too much. If you have to think too consciously about it, it's going to be difficult to really get it to work properly. So yeah, those are some examples and some thoughts. As always, if this is the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. Here you can check out a lot of stuff on jazz guitar, so a lot of stuff on scales and arpeggios, chord voicings, and with these longer form videos, also a bit of philosophy on playing, on improvising, and on comping. And let me know what you think about this format, of course, because I think this is something I could return to later, also just take another song and then talk about some other aspects of how to comp it. At the same time, I can also just cover a lot more stuff in these longer form videos where I don't have to write out all the examples and stuff like that. And I actually do really think that you learn something by not focusing on sheet music, but just listening on another level. I think that's something that I also myself learn a lot from. If you want to help me keep making all these videos, then check out my Patreon page. There's a small community of people who are helping me create all these videos, helping me find the time and the money to keep on going. And I'm very grateful for them doing so, because it makes it a lot easier for me to do this. So if that's something you're interested in, you can already do that from $1 per week, because it's per weekly lesson. And then you're supporting all my videos. So check that out if that's something you're interested in. For the rest, if this is the first time you're here, subscribe to my channel, and then I'll see you later this week with a lesson on counterpoint. Or if you're watching this later, then later this week with something else. Thank you for watching, and until next time.